Yeah, so it's on at all times. Thank you very much. Thank the candidates for coming out. Just a couple brief announcements. All candidates will have a 1-minute opening statement, just so you can understand the flow. They'll have a 1-minute opening statement, a 2-minute closing statement. Mr. Deese on the front row here will have a yellow card signifying 30 seconds and a red card when it's time for the candidates to close up their answer. When a candidate's asked a question, they'll have 2 minutes. All candidates, we're clear, all candidates have an opportunity to respond. So if a candidate wants to respond and wants to keep a question going until I close it, we're welcome to continue to respond. Just tell me. And also, if a candidate mentions another candidate's name, you obviously have an opportunity to respond. Your responses are 1 minute. We get close to the end. I may have some 30-second quick questions just to get through everything. So thank you very much. Let's get started. We did not draw numbers, gentlemen. I'm sorry. I was going to draw 1 through 4, so we're going to do an old-fashioned left to right. I apologize that I forgot to do that. So we'll open with Mr. Scupin. 1 minute to open, please. Microphone's at the end of the table.
My name is Mike Scupin, and I'm going to follow Sam's example and ask for your vote right now, because usually I forget to do that. I do have a Master of Science degree in Technology Management. I've been an adjunct professor at North Georgia College and State University. Most of my career has been in small business. The adjunct professor is just a part-time thing that I did because I enjoyed teaching. One of the things I would like to point out is being a land surveyor, which is what I did most of my time, and that worked into doing also some land development and building. I'm very well versed in some of the EPA requirements and what kind of a burden our government puts on small business. And that's something that we really need to address, is all the burdens that our government, both state and federal, places on us as small business people. I'm running simply because I'm fed up with the omnibus bills that our current congressman has been voting for, and I want it stopped. Thank you.
Brian, did I need this microphone for your TV?
No, sir.
Oh, okay.
We've proven that.
Just wanted to be sure. I'm Paul Broun. I think I know most of you, and you've heard me talk before. And your choice is clear in this race. You want to continue with an establishment inside the Beltway congressman who's voted for higher spending, more taxes, bigger government, who's been pandering to the leadership, and that's our current congressman, Doug Collins. Or do you want someone who is a proven conservative constitutionalist, which is what I have done. I served in the U.S. House for 4 terms. Used 4 questions of how I voted. The first, is it right? Is it biblically correct? Secondly, is it constitutional, according to the original intent? Third, do we need it? Fourth, can we afford it? All 4 have to be yes for me to vote yes. If one's no, I voted no, and I pledge to you tonight that's exactly how I will vote when I'm your next U.S. Congressman. We've got to stop this out-of-control government, and that's exactly what I've been fighting for. Vote Paul Broun.
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
My name is Roger Fitzpatrick. I am a native of White County, Cleveland, Georgia, home of the Cabbage Patch Kids. I am a former Marine. I am a semi-retired educator. Spent 30 years in the White County school system and retired as an elementary school principal, and now I work with a Mountain Education Charter High School in Habersham County. And I also teach along with my wife at a homeschool academy. And so education is a very large part of my life. I am a constitutional conservative, and I believe that the way to return this country to the greatness that it was intended to be is by the adherence to the original intent of the Constitution. I will work to make sure that that is done to the best of my ability when I have the opportunity to serve you in Washington. I ask for your vote. I ask for your prayers. I ask for your support. Thank you.
Georgia. I started off on the farm, and then I joined the military at the bottom of the plow, worked my way up, and retired with the flight rank. I did that by getting things done. Now, my education, I started off in Red Eye University at night. Some of you know what Red Eye University is. I got a bachelor's in business administration. I got a bachelor's in business administration. I got a master's in public administration, and I'm a doctoral candidate in political science. Tonight, you have a choice between 3 citizen candidates and 2 politicians. If you like what you've got, what you've had, then do the same old thing over again. If you want something new, there are 3 people there. And what I say is, not what you like, it's what the country needs that you need to base your judgment on. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to start with Mr. Fitzpatrick. Mr. Fitzpatrick, let me just bring up a couple of things here. On March 2nd, this was on March 2nd in the AJC, it was reported that a tip had said that Mr. Broun was considering coming into the race. At that time, there was discussion, and in that article, and it was also released by Z Politics, a conservative firebrand who is frequently a thorn in the side of Republican leaders. Brown's last months in office were often overshadowed by ethics investigation into his congressional office, alleged misuse of $43,000 of taxpayer money. When I was at the Lanier Tea Party, on March 17th, you spoke that night with Mr. Fontaine, with Dr. Broun, and Mr. Scupin, but you never discussed your concerns about Dr. Brown's possible ethics violations. And the reason I bring that up, it seems in the last 2 weeks, you wrote the other day on your Facebook page, check out my interview with Brian Pritchard from Fetcher News, in which I discussed Paul Brown's ethics issues and the problems with Doug Collins' voting record. Have you, here in the last couple of weeks, do you have more concerns about possible ethics issues with Dr. Brown? Because you've been talking about it a lot more.
Yes, sir, I do. I do have genuine concerns about the possibility, and I'll say that because nothing's been proven, but I believe that from my looking at all of the evidence that I've been able to find, there is the possibility of ethics violations. And so there's a report that was put out by the Office of Congressional Ethics, 46-page report. I read through it, and in the conclusion that they came to, there were 4 points, and one of the points plainly says that the services that were provided to the Congressional office were impermissible. So, and it all goes to Dr. Broun hiring a communications advisor. And so it centered all around that, and then paying him from the member's account, which is taxpayer money, not campaign funds. And so I read through all of that, and there, based on the interviews here, there are serious concerns that I have, as well as the fact that his chief of staff has been indicted recently by the Justice Department, and the communications advisor last 7 months ago pled guilty for lying to investigators about his relationship with Dr. Brown's office. So yes, I have genuine concerns. And from what I'm understanding and everything that I read, the reason that the investigation was dropped is because Dr. Broun is no longer serving in Congress.
Would you like to respond, Dr. Brown?
Sure. Well, you've been listening to Bill Copley too much. If you want to know the truth, just go on our website, paulbrown.com, and you can get all of the information and what it's all about. There was an anonymous allegation made. I cooperated with investigators thoroughly, talked to the grand jury where the investigators presented all the evidence. No charges were ever filed against me. No indictment was ever requested. And the grand jury went home. So from my perspective, it's all over and done with. Now, if indeed my chief of staff is guilty of doing what he's been charged in, which is basically lying himself, then, and it's obstruction of justice is what they've been charged with. It is only because he directly disobeyed my instructions and my orders to him. And if he's guilty, he ought to be punished. But I'm not guilty, and Mr. Collins and his minions continue to attack me about this, and it's really to get away from the issues that face you people. We've got to stop this out of control government, and Doug Collins has been a part of that. And now, one of my other opponents is taking up Mr. Collins' mantra.
Let me make one thing perfectly clear, that I am running against Mr. Collins and his voting record, and I am not in any way whatsoever taking up his mantra. I am looking at evidence that was presented by the Office of Congressional Ethics, and I am not taking anything from the Collins campaign.
Okay, hold on just a minute, gentlemen. I don't mind that we have this discussion. Dr. Brown, you said your chief of staff, and did I hear you correctly, disobeyed your instructions? Did I get?
Absolutely. If indeed he's guilty of what he has 8 indictments against him, and if he is guilty, he ought to be punished. I believe in the rule of law. I don't believe anybody is above the law, whether it's the President of the United States all the way down to regular people like us. And if he is guilty, and it's only an allegation, and all the things that you just heard are just allegations from an anonymous tip that we'll never know who gave that tip to the Office of Congressional Ethics, which I don't think is fair either. We're supposed to be able to face our accuser. But the thing is, Doug Collins and now Mr. Fitzpatrick are trying to attack me personally. And in fact, on your TV program 2 Mondays ago, I was accused of, it was stated by Mr. Fitzpatrick that absolutely the ethics about investigation would be reopened by the House, which is not very likely, and essentially said I was guilty, which is not factual. The grand jury looked into all these allegations, looked at the facts. I cooperated with them fully, to the point that we even had an investigator knock on my door and say, well, we don't have a search warrant, but you've been very cooperative. We'd like to look at your emails. And I said, I'll give you one better. Why don't you just take my computer? So I unhooked the computer. They took it away for 3 days. Hadn't worked right since. I wonder if they put a bug in it. Anyway, no wrongdoing was ever found by the investigators on my part. No charges were ever filed. No indictment request was ever made. There was never any vote on an indictment one way or the other. The grand jury heard all the facts and then they went home. And that's the end of the story.
Okay, now, Mr. Fontaine, Mr. Scupin, we're not leaving you out of this, but if you don't want to, and we're not going to stay with this subject much longer, but I have a question that has come in today that I was asked to do tonight. If you return to Congress, Dr. Broun, what would you do to ensure your constituents in the 9th District that this wouldn't happen again as far as being a good steward of the taxpayers' money and a chief of staff? And what would you do for what maybe would say better oversight this time than what took place last time? Because obviously some things have happened.
Well, the communications guy that I hired pled guilty to lying to the Office of Congressional Ethics, and I don't know what that's all about. The charges against my chief of staff are about lying to the federal investigators, which I did not do. I did not authorize. And in fact, I told my chief of staff we're going to cooperate with the investigators fully, because we fully complied with the ethics rules of the House, fully complied with the law. Now, I don't know about the other things, because all the grand jury proceedings are all secret. And the only time they ever get so that they're not secret is if they vote to indict or not. You'll get a true bill or no bill. But if they don't do anything, if they find nothing there, then they don't send you a nice little note saying, congratulations, you're not charged with anything. So the fact that the investigators looked into it at length for 2 years, and I cooperated fully with them, then, they presented all the facts to the grand jury in Macon, and the grand jury just went home. They didn't do anything. So I was not charged. There is no indictment. There's no anything. And that's in itself is an exoneration because there's nothing for them to find in what I did. I've always told my staff, we're not even going to get to the edge, get close to the line of an ethics violation. Now, I don't know what the chief of staff did, if anything, to bring about this indictment. What I was told by the investigators early on is that I wasn't even the subject of the investigation. And I was told by the investigators, my best friend, who's also my lawyer, and my FEC compliance guy when he was deposed by the investigators, all of them were told that what they were looking at is a possible obstruction of justice by my chief of staff, or by what I was told, they didn't name him, but I was told that they were looking into obstruction of justice by one of my staff members. If he's guilty, he needs to be punished. If he's guilty, it's because he did not follow my direct instructions to him.
General Fontaine?
Yes, I'd just like to say, and you can take it on my time if you want, that you hear a lot of smoke blowing around, you see two sides of things, but if you want the facts, just read a 46-page report and you make up your mind. I won't try to make up your mind for you, number one. And the other thing is that I spent many years in the military, and if my chief of staff screwed up, it was my fault, because he worked for me. And I had a lot of people under me. And when somebody screwed up, I was the ultimate person that had to be responsible for that. So I feel that a small staff is not a big thing to look at. And the last thing is, I've handled multi-million-dollar budgets, and I've never gone over budget. I've never gone over budget. I've always come under it. And I've always moved the money around and used it where it was needed, not blew it on something that Bean counties wanted me to do, so their budget would look just right. We use common sense, but I've heard this argument now several times.
This is it. Last response.
Dr. Brown accused me of flat out saying that he was guilty on your radio show, and I do not recall saying that at all. I said, looking at the evidence, it certainly raises the suggestion of guilt, but I in no way, because you have not been convicted, therefore I cannot say that you are guilty or not. But based on the evidence, there is certainly the suggestion, and that is, I believe, what I said on your radio show.
30 seconds if you want. Good?
I'm done.
All right,
We need to get on to
Mr.
We
Scupin.
need to get on to issues, Brian. This is ridiculous.
Mr. Scupin, recently you sent a letter to the Federal Election Commission concerning, and you signed that, and Mr. Fontaine signed that. Could you take 2 minutes, and it was concerning the Federal Election Commission, concerning Z Politics, the Doug Collins campaign, and the Stone Ridge group. Can you take a couple minutes to explain to the voters what you did there?
Yes, what that was about, and I have, and I assume Bernie has too, has the same feeling about things that I have. I don't like to see wrongs being done. And when I see wrongs being done, I want to get involved and I want to fight back. What happened was Dr. Brown had made a telephone call to Doug Collins to let him know that he was going to run. Nobody knew about that conversation but the two of them, because Doug called Paul back. Right after Paul announced, that took place the week before Paul actually signed up to announce, but after he signed up to announce, then this article comes out that ends up on Z Politics. Well, how did they get the information? And if you begin to trace it back, and if you'll go on my website, you'll find all this documentation there. But if you begin to trace it back, in the article on Z Politics, it makes the statement that they had it from the Collins campaign. Nobody in the Collins campaign knew about it but Doug. So how did it get to Z Politics? Well, it got there through the Stone Ridge Group and then on to Z Politics. Now, the Stone Ridge Group is owned by Jay Williams. Guess who owns the website for Z Politics? Jay Williams. So it's fairly obvious that there's a connection between Z Politics, the Collins campaign, and the Stone Ridge Group. And because Z Politics did not put on there the declaration that this is a paid political announcement, which is required by law, it looked to us like this was something that needed to be questioned. So we sent a letter to the FEC and we're asking, is this right that this was done this way, or should they have notified the public that this was not a news story, that this was really a piece of political propaganda?
Would you please comment, Mr. Fontaine? You also signed that letter, General?
Letter. My biggest concern was the conflict of interest between the two firms. And when you get into the rest of it, as I mentioned on the radio last week, the Irish have a good name for it. They call it shenanigans. It's not unusual in Washington, but that sort of thing happens, and it shouldn't. When you get news, you ought to feel that it is news, it's not commentary. That's all I'd like to add.
Okay, this question for Dr. Broun. You've already served in the 11th District. You voted twice against John Boehner. One of 12, if I'm correct, that voted for Alan West for Speaker of the House. Next session, if you were to go to Congress, would you be able to support Paul Ryan? Have you already thought about that? Because you have done that before and voted against John Boehner. And would you be able to support Paul Ryan as Speaker of the House or work with him?
Well, if he's elected Speaker, I'll certainly work for him, but I'll do everything I can to prevent him from being Speaker, just like I did with John Boehner. And I'll tell y'all kind of some inside story about what went on in 2012. A group of us conservatives got it together. We had 21 of us that had signed a pledge to each other that we would not vote for John Boehner to be Speaker. If 19 had upheld that pledge, he would not have been Speaker in the 113th Congress, the last one. Only 12 of us upheld the pledge. 12. I started the process with some other conservatives all across this country to prevent Paul Ryan from being Speaker when John Boehner resigned. Because I knew that Paul Ryan would be nothing more than John Boehner II. He's a nice guy. I like him personally. But if he's elected Speaker, I certainly will work with him. But I'm going to do everything I can to prevent him from being Speaker, because he is absolutely right in the heart and soul of this government that is just totally out of control. And it's got to stop. And that's what I fought the whole time I was in Congress. I used my 4 questions. Is it right? Is it constitutional? Do we need it? And can we afford it? That's how I voted. That's the reason that I was rated within the top few of the members of Congress as being the most conservative. One year I was rated as the #1 most conservative member of Congress, because I voted constitutionally according to the original intent. The legislation I introduced was to get rid of some of the functions of the federal government. For instance, I introduced a bill to get rid of the Department of Education. And in fact, Doug Collins says he wants to get rid of Common Core, but he authorized Common Core in a bill called ESSA, and then in the omnibus bill voted to fund it. It's not truthful what he's saying on it as a candidate. So we've got to stop this out of control government, and I have that proven record.
Let me ask you, Mr. Scupin, for 1 minute. You heard Dr. Broun say he would not support Paul Ryan as Speaker. I'm not answering that for you, but if I heard that correctly. We are in a, right now, we're in a time where just the vote for John Boehner is causing challenges all across this country to several sitting people in Congress, would you support Paul Ryan as Speaker of the House? Would you support him as Speaker of the House? And would you also comment that, knowing that if you went against this tonight, it could possibly cause you a challenger next time?
No, I could not support Paul Ryan any more than I could John Boehner. They're cut from the same mold. There's a group that's, you might say, in charge high up in the Republican Party, and they're what's causing the problems that we have in this nation. And the only way I can see to stop that is to finally get enough men that are willing to stand on principle in Congress to put a stop to it and change the rules. We're always hearing about Rule 21 and how we can't vote to change certain financial aspects because it's mandatory spending. Well, it's only mandatory spending because they instituted Rule 21, which they can change, which they refuse to change, because they want to come back here and tell us we can't change it. We don't need that going on in Congress. And we need men that will stand up there and say, no, we've had enough. I will not go along with this anymore. Thank you.
General Fontaine, 1 minute. Would you support Paul Ryan for Speaker of the House?
I think we're quite unanimous in saying that we would not. I know Paul Broun has supported Alan West, and I think that was a good move on his part. I support that. The biggest problem we got is there's no leadership in the House, and that's the problem with Paul Ryan. He's a nice guy, as you mentioned, but leaders are not necessarily nice guys. They're guys that can make the people coalesce, and we're going to have a lot of new people coming in, and a few that are going to go back that are going to have religion now. They need somebody that can get them to work together, and I don't want that job, but I do want to help put it together because I believe strongly in leadership. I've had a lot of training in leadership, and I've had a lot of opportunity to use it. And I feel strongly that's what we need. We need to change the system that was just mentioned, this antiquated system where you hang around and you do what they're told, and sooner or later they'll let you sharpen pencils.
You're welcome to go on record with this, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Would you support Paul Ryan as Speaker of the House?
No, sir, I would not. The problem that we have with so many people that are in the House right now is they do two things. One, to get elected, and two, to get reelected. Yeah. And whenever you have the establishment being in charge, then the establishment will work with you to make sure that you get reelected again. I am one that I do not care whether I would be reelected or not. I would be sent to represent the constituents of the 9th District. I would be sent to work according to the original intent of the Constitution to make sure that we do things according to the rule of law, the way it was originally intended. And that includes not kowtowing to whatever the establishment says, but doing what is right because it's the right thing to do.
Dr. Brown, I want to come back to you on this because for people that may be watching the video and the ones here tonight, could you explain to us, after you voted against Paul Ryan, John Boehner, and voted for Alan West, what can be done, as we call it out here, maybe to stop the blackmail and stop the tactics and the penalties against congressmen that vote according to their district's wishes? I mean, explain a little bit of that and what's going on there and how you deal with that.
The way you deal with it is we've got to have a revolution at the ballot box, folks. And I pledge to you as your congressman, when you elect me to be your congressman, I'll help lead that charge. When I was first elected in 2007, there were two of us in the U.S. House that voted according to the original intent of the Constitution. One in the Senate. There's Dr. Ron Paul, a good friend of mine, and then Jim DeMint over in the Senate. Now, the good news is there are more today, but they're not enough. And what we see all across this country is people say they're constitutional. For Pete's sake, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama say they're constitutional. Doug Collins, when he was running in 2012, said he was an original intent constitutionalist. Saturday at the convention, I talked to a lady from Madison County, and she told me that Doug Collins told her And another lady from Habersham County said the same thing, that he told her that he was going to vote just like Paul Broun has voted. In fact, the guy that is in the 10th district, Jody Heiss, he ran on those 4 questions that I've put together, my questions, that I pledged of how I was going to vote. The point is, we've got to elect people who just will do what they say. We have seen people across the board, across the country, say they'll vote conservatively, that they'll vote constitutionally, but you don't know how anybody's going to vote, and until somebody gets there, they don't know how they'll vote either, because of the pressures. And the only way we're going to make a change is if somebody's not upholding the pledge of upholding and defending the Constitution against enemies, both foreign and domestic, as I made 5 times in the U.S. military, 4 times in the Congress. If they don't do that, we've got to throw them out and put somebody else in place, and it's up to we the people to do that. And I'll work very hard to spark that revolution at the ballot box.
Anyone like to respond? Mr. Scupin.
Yes, I'd like to go 30 minutes.
30 minutes? Go right ahead.
I have to take exception with the statement that was just made that nobody knows what they're going to do under pressure until they get there. That's just not an accurate statement. I've been under pressure in a lot of different situations, and if you have good, sound principles to fall back on, then you pretty well know how you're going to react when the pressure is applied. I've got those kind of principles, and I will not succumb to pressure from these guys up here in Washington, because I don't want anything they've got.
Amen.
Go ahead, General Fontaine.
Being under pressure, I've been there. I know what a crack and thump exercise is. Maybe some people here to do, I don't very much, but that is a point that you make, Mike, and I agree with that. Saying you're going to do this, you're going to do that, don't talk to me about that until you've been there and done that, okay? Now, what we need is somebody to go up there and not be the most conservative, this way or that way, based on somebody's opinion. You can get people that will give you what you want as far as qualifications. What's needed is somebody can get the job done, and one person, of course, can't get the job done. So first of all, you have to be able to get along with other people, and you have to provide some leadership and get a group. That's what will get things done. Numbers. Thank you.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, let me ask you a question here. When we hear the omnibus bill, we think of the recent bill that just passed. But let me ask you this question. Sad to say that's done and over with. An omnibus bill is a proposed law that covers a number of diverse and unrelated topics. Omnibus is it's put together. It's several from appropriations. It's a whole lot of appropriations pushed into one bill. Would you vote? Do you see a path that you would ever vote for an omnibus bill if you were sent to Congress?
No, sir, I do not see a path where I would ever vote for an omnibus bill. Each bill needs to be able to stand on its own and receive an up or down vote according to its own merits. So often what you see is you have this piece of must-pass legislation. And let me just say this, that there is no piece of legislation that has to pass.
That's right.
What we need to do is we need to fight to make sure that what is passed is what is right, according to, I believe, the Word of God and according to the original intent of the Constitution. And so these bills need to be able to stand alone, and there shouldn't be riders attached to them to this piece of must-pass legislation that should not be a part of it. If it's totally unrelated to the piece of legislation, it should not be attached at all. So I would not vote for something that is going to sour the bill. I would not vote for omnibus bills that throw everything into one pot, because it's just not the way that our founders intended for us to be able to work in a legislative fashion.
Dr. Brown, omnibus bill, do you see a path that you would ever vote for an omnibus bill?
I've never voted for an omnibus bill, and I don't see any way, well, there's no way that an omnibus bill would ever meet my 4 questions. In fact, all 4 of them would be no. So with the 4 questions that I ask, that's going to outlaw any votes for me for an omnibus bill. And Roger's correct about all of these things being thrown together, and they put a little piece in for this delegation or this congressman and a little piece over here for another one to try to get them all to vote for it. We need to return to regular order. There are 12 appropriations bills that are supposed to be brought forward one by one. John Boehner, when he finally became Speaker, he brought a few of them, but the problem that he ran into is that when he brought those bills, I went to the floor over and over again to cut spending. I introduced more targeted spending cuts than any other member of Congress when I was there. So, no, I'll never vote for an omnibus bill. With the whole 12 bills put together, no. There's no way.
Let me change it just a little for you, Mr. Scupin. One, you can answer, would you ever see a path that you would vote for any omnibus bill? But also, over in Hall County, the Hall County GOP debate, there's been a lot of discussion about the omnibus bill funding Planned Parenthood. And Congressman Collins discussed Rule 21. Since that day, first, would you vote for an omnibus? And since that day, have you looked at the Rules Committee or Rule 21 to get a better understanding of what Congressman Collins was saying that day?
First off, the omnibus bill, that's just simply something that shouldn't take place. The reason they like the omnibus bills up there is we don't know what's in them because they're so big that we're not going to read them, and they know that. So they can put it in there, and then they can come back and tell us whatever. I see a lot of dog and pony show that takes place with Doug Collins. For instance, some of you may recognize this email that came out this week where he is all upset about Obama changing the rules for bringing refugees in. Well, he made a big deal out of this, but he voted for Obama's immigration. He voted for his refugee resettlement, which is part of what now he's against. Pure dog and pony show. Now, you ask me would I ever vote for an omnibus bill? The answer is most likely no. There could be an omnibus bill that might be good. I don't know. I can't see how. But if it's constitutional, everything they're in there, and we needed it, then yeah, I guess probably I would vote for it. But I can't imagine how that can happen. And another big thing that's wrong with omnibus bills, if I'm not mistaken, when this one finally came back to them, they had 24 hours to read it. Thousands of pages. You can't read it that fast. So anything you get you can't read, you vote no on it. That's simple. And was there a second part of the question that I missed? Rule 21. I have not looked up Rule 21 other than just knowing what it does. I know what it does, but I've not sat down and read it and studied it. But regardless, if there's something that mandates Congress, it's no good because you can't. See, every 2 years that changes. So Rule 21 disappears at the end of every 2-year session, and they have to vote it back in. The answer is don't vote it back in. Just vote no.
Go ahead, you can respond. I'd like to ask let me ask Roger Fitzpatrick a question first. Mr. Fitzpatrick, on the Rule 21 that day, the Rules Committee, were you satisfied with Congressman Collins' answer about the omnibus not funding Planned Parenthood due to the Rule 21? You remember that discussion that Saturday morning? And he said Rule 21 were actually funds that were non-negotiable, could not be changed. You remember that morning?
I do, and he actually spoke the truth for the first time that I had heard. Most of the time when going around to the different counties, his staff is saying that there was zero funding in that bill for Planned Parenthood, and that's not true. It's available through the Title X grant. Now, I believe what Mr. Collins was referring to was that the vast majority of the funding comes through Medicaid funding, and that's where the Rule 21 comes in. That's the way I understand it. And that's part of the mandatory spending. So while there was some funds in the omnibus bill for Planned Parenthood, if they choose to apply for the grant and if they receive the grant, there would be funding. It's not an automatic spending for Planned Parenthood, whereas in the Medicaid funding, that's an automatic because it's supported in the Rule 21. It has to be done on a year-by-year basis. So I was more satisfied with what he said than what I had heard all the times prior from his staff.
Okay, you wanted to respond a minute ago?
How about the general?
You, General, did you want to respond?
Yes, I had some experience in, appropriations versus authorizations, and, there's just an element of truth in, and you take a little bit of truth and wind it up and make some political rhetoric out of it, and this is what we had that Saturday morning. If I am involved in passing a bill that says that we're going to provide you with some money, and we do it year after year, we can rescind that bill at some point. Appropriations are a little bit different. They're for a set period of time. That's the only time you can use them. So what we have is just an element of truth in there. As far as the omnibus bill, I got to tell the coach over there, they do the same thing at the state. They put it together, it's about that thick, and they say vote it up or down, and if you don't vote it up, the world's going to come to an end, right? That's what they tell you. So you need to stand up, and I'm sure you will. And that's the way it works. Thank you.
Dr. Brown?
Yeah, I'd like to comment about that because the thing is, Congress all the time suspends the rules and passes things. So they could have suspended that rule. But the thing is, the omnibus bill does fund Planned Parenthood. And the proof of that is Franklin Graham, you might remember, Franklin Graham quit the GOP. He said, I'm not a Republican anymore because the omnibus bill funds Planned Parenthood. And in fact, Huffington Post, which is not very conservative, I don't think, also in their headlines about the bill. Headlines, big win for Planned Parenthood. Now, they could have put a rider in there, and that's the issue. Some riders are not bad, because some riders are limitation riders. And the point I made that caused the congressman to respond the way he did was if they put a rider in there that said no funds appropriated by this bill will go to Planned Parenthood or any of its affiliates, that would have stopped funding. But you see, the leadership did not do anything to fight Obama. Nothing. There was no whimper of a fight. We've got to fight it. We've got to stop this out-of-control government, and that's the issue.
I'll start with Mr. Scupin, and I would like for everybody to get involved in this question. I'll start with you. Saudi Arabia says if we release 28 pages to the public concerning 9/11, that they are actually threatening to sell $750 billion of assets, American assets. Knowing that with Saudi Arabia, energy independence, oil, all the above, do you release the 28 pages?
Brian, you might explain, because these folks may not know about the 28 pages, what all that is about.
Thank you. The 28 pages are from the 9/11 Commission report. And the 9/11 Commission report, it may show Saudi Arabia involvement. My understanding is 15 out of 18 attackers were from Saudi Arabia on 9/11. And so Saudi Arabia has said that if we release the 28 pages to the public, they will sell $750 billion of American assets. Did I get that correct? I'm pretty close now. Mr. Scupin.
Well, I'm a big believer in truth. I don't like it when our government hides things from us, and that's exactly what they did in that report when they redacted those 28 pages. I think the American people have a right to know why we lost over 3,000 people when the Twin Towers went down. We need to know who was behind it. Some people know who was behind it, and it's looking more and more every day like it was the Saudis that was behind it, which is why they don't want it released. And I believe the American people have a right to it, and I do not believe from what we're seeing that the Saudis are a true ally of America, and I believe we do release that document.
Dr. Brown, the same thing.
Go ahead, Dr. Brown.
That's
your line.
Okay, I read the 28 pages, and I was the original co-sponsor of a bill to force them to be declassified. They're classified top secret. In fact, I had to go down into what's called a SCIF to read those, and had to leave my telephone and everything there on the outside before I could even go in and read them. And I had a secret briefing about those 28 pages. Any member of Congress could go down and read those 28 pages, but you have to make an appointment. And it's hard to go down there because the establishment don't want members to go down and do so. But I'm like Mike, we need to have the ability to see what our federal government's doing, and I'm all for openness. Unless there's something that is very sensitive in the way of information that has to do with our national security. But there has to be oversight to that as well. So I introduced a bill to open up the 28 pages and let the American people see them. And I'm very much in favor of doing so after having read those 28 pages. But I'm still, because it is secret, it is classified, I cannot even discuss what's in those 28 pages, or I could be prosecuted, just like Hillary Clinton ought to be prosecuted in Fort Leavenworth prison.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, talk about the 28 pages and what you would do.
There are certainly times when, because of national security, that the people do not need to know things. I'm okay with that. That would be few and far between, though, when you make those exceptions. There is a scripture that says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." And so, based on that, I believe that it is very important that we, the people, know the truth about what has happened. So I would be in favor of the releasing of the 28 pages. And if the Saudis want to threaten, then go ahead and let them threaten. We won't buy their oil anymore. We will develop our own reserves. We will become energy independent. We will support ourselves. We won't give them foreign aid anymore. And that'll be just fine and dandy. And we will take care of our own.
That's right.
General Fontaine?
I have to agree with what was just said. It goes to the Arab mentality to start with, okay? They have contempt for us, and I can understand why. I think everybody out here can understand why. If you draw a line in the sand and then you don't back it up, there's contempt there. And they think that they can bluster their way here in selling this stuff. I say it's time we stand up and have some backbone and do whatever it takes. Now, those several $1 billion, well, I don't think so, number one. And number two is, so what? You have to stand up at some point, and I think this is the point where we need to start standing up. Get rid of ISIS, for instance, and if the Saudis don't like what's in that report, well, that's just too darn bad.
Right. That's right.
We'll go to you now, Mr. General Fontaine, and I want to hear from all of you also, and this is concerning the military. There's a lot of reports about the downsizing and concern of the military, concern to our readiness, being prepared. Would you vote to increase military spending? And what do you think we need to do first in our military? Increase the size? What are some of the things that you think we need to do?
I appreciate that question. The very first thing, I would send a letter to the new president, whoever he is, and tell him that those generals that have been pushed out by Obama, be offered the opportunity to return, and when they are in place, they know where the problems are, they know the people who had no backbone and have allowed our military to get to where it is. I feel sure, and I have reason to feel sure, that they would take care of the problem. That's a good start. As far as supporting the military, there's two things. The one is yes, they need the funding that we talked about here, but the second part of that is that there is so much fraud, waste, and abuse that needs to be addressed.
Right.
And any congressman can start doing that by bringing out where this stuff is. Those of you that have been with the military know that there are a lot of civilians that have nothing but contempt for people in uniform. And then there are those that, of course, like to get rich on it. You've heard about the $800 toilet seat and so forth. It goes on. So there's two sides of it. Yeah, they need the money and they need to be able to spend it where they need it. Because we send $1 to the military and 10 cents of it gets to the soldier.
Let me move to, I want everybody to respond, but let me move to the end of the table. Mr. Scupin, same question for you, the military. Would you increase spending, or have you looked at the military and what you think we need to do under the next administration?
Well, the current president has been reducing our capabilities to respond to any world crisis that might involve our people. And I think that sets a very dangerous precedent. He has pulled our ships from all across the seas back home. We have no presence in other areas where we need a presence. He's doing everything he can to weaken our military by changing the rules, by cutting out funding, and when he is finished with his term, we are definitely going to have to do something about increasing our military spending and getting our military back up to the strength that it needs to be to protect this nation.
Dr. Brown?
I'm a Marine. I've already told you that. Most recently, this Marine got back in the Navy Reserve in 2010 as a medical doctor. Because I'm a Marine, we involved in a conflict, and I wanted to serve my nation. So I got back in for one reason. I wanted to be deployed. I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2012. I was discharged, honorably discharged from the U.S. Navy as a full commander 2 years ago. So I've got recent experience in the military. We're not supporting our men and women in uniform today. We don't have enough ships in the Navy. We don't have enough brigades in the Army. We don't have enough wings in the Air Force. And God knows we don't have enough Marines. Yes, we've had 4 presidents. George Herbert Walker Bush, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama have steadily degraded our defense capability. We need to build our defenses back up. We need Star Wars that President Reagan talked about more now than ever in the history of this country. We've got to increase military spending and stop spending money on things such as the Department of Labor and the Department of Commerce. Let's get rid of the Department of Education. And let's get rid of the EPA while we're at it, too.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
The number one responsibility of the federal government is national security. That's the number one, and I would dare say the second most, next important falls way behind that. We have got to make sure that our military is as strong as it can possibly be, because it is through strength that we will have peace. And the way that we would project that peace, our Navy is at the lowest level that it's been since World War II. And we need to build up our Navy. We need to build up all 4 branches of the armed forces. But we've got to do this. We've got to do it in a smart way so that we don't pay exorbitant prices for toilet seats or hammers or bolts. So there's too much waste. So I'll agree with the general there that we've got to get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse. But we have got to make building the military a top priority so that we will have the strongest nation on the face of the earth.
Mr. Scupin, give us your criteria. What would a Mike Scupin, Mr. Scupin, Supreme Court Justice pick look like, be like, and what would you require?
Look like me.
Yeah, I nominate Frank.
Take the look like off.
If you're asking for a person, I cannot give you a person. But the requirement that I would have would be for a man that will stand and honor the original intent of this document. And quit reading into it things that do not exist. At the 9th District Convention just recently, there was a lady that gave us a talk on the Constitution. She allowed questions, and in answering one of the questions, she made the statement that the Supremacy Clause is to put a check basically on the states so that their laws don't supersede the federal laws. And she'd just been telling us about how there were enumerated powers. And so I asked her a question. I said, are you telling me that anything that the federal government passes, the states have to acquiesce to because of the Supremacy Clause? She says, yes, that's correct. I said, then you're telling me we don't have a constitution. Right? If the federal government can do what they want and we have to succumb to it as states, we have no constitution. Now, I'll tell you something else. We have an attorney general sitting in the state of Georgia that believes the Supremacy Clause means that states can do nothing if the federal government passes a law. Folks, that's wrong. And if you don't know that, it's because you haven't read this book. Read the Constitution. Know what it says. That's the only way that we're going to know when our rights are being taken. The jury is mentioned in this thing 3 times. It's the only thing in the Constitution that really expands one concept. And we have lost part of our rights as citizens through the fact that the federal government set up administrative courts to hear IRS cases, EPA cases, and so forth without a jury. You are denied a jury trial by the federal government. That needs to change, people.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, the leader, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, is not going to bring up hearings for the President's Supreme Court appointee at this time. And he's saying a new president, he's waiting for the next president to make that appointment. Tell us a little bit about the kind of Supreme Court justice you could vote for and what you would be looking for in that pick.
Obviously, I would be looking for someone that would adhere to the original intent of the Constitution. And one thing that is important is that in Article 3, it lists the types of cases that the federal judiciary is allowed to hear. And there are 11 different types of cases. So it is the types of cases that the Supreme Court and then the inferior courts are allowed to hear. They're enumerated. You can list them. These types of cases. And guess what? Marriage is not one of those cases. Abortion is not one of those cases. So there are specific things that they must adhere to. So I would be looking at someone that would adhere to the original intent and understand that the Supreme Court and any other federal court has specific limited jurisdiction. And so if there were to be a case that were to try to make its way to the Supreme Court, I would want somebody to be able to say, okay, does it fall into any of these 11 different types of cases? If it does, great, we'll take it. If it does not, it is rejected because we do not have jurisdiction on those types of cases.
That's right.
Would either of the two of you like to respond?
Sure.
Go ahead. Go ahead first.
You asked for an individual.
Yes.
I'd like to see somebody put on the court just like Clarence Thomas. I know Justice Thomas. He's actually the most constitutional of all of the justices. I know personally, or knew personally, Justice Scalia as well. He and I have had meals together, just the two of us. Clarence Thomas is even stronger on the Constitution than Justice Scalia was. As strong as he was. So that would be the weakest side that I would want to see. The thing is, in the House, we don't have the authority of advice and consent. That is held for the Senate. And what I would do as a congressman, when you make me your congressman, is I will push the Senate. I will push our senators from Georgia and other senators that I already know and work with to not confirm anyone unless they absolutely are going to stick to their oath of office. to uphold and defend the Constitution against the enemies both foreign and domestic. Right now today, we've got 7 enemies of the Constitution wearing black robes sitting on the U.S. Supreme Court. We need to get rid of them or get them into upholding their office, their oath of office. And Congress is going to have to start reeling in the court. Roger's absolutely correct. The cases that the Supreme Court can hear are very limited. Go read, as Mr. Scupin said. I encourage you to not only read the Constitution, but read what our founding fathers said about it. And I highly recommend one resource so that you can know what they meant. It's called The Federalist Papers in Modern Language by Mary E. Webster. The Federalist Papers in Modern Language by Mary E. Webster. It's a great gift for your children, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Let's go back to the Constitution, and that's what I'll fight for.
Would you like to respond, General?
Well, having taught political science for 15 years, I'm happy to see the Federalist Papers come on. And I agree with Dr. Brown that they make good reading, especially 10 and 51. The problem that we face, and I agree with everything that's been said here, but the flip side of that is you never know. Earl Warren was supposed to be a conservative justice. It turned out that he wasn't one Eisenhower thought he'd be, and we have to keep that in mind that these things can change.
So is Rob.
I'd like to go over to another subject in a way, but you know, the executive branch of government in 1951, we passed an amendment with no problem putting term limits in. I think that maybe the other 2 branches ought to look. We ought to look at doing it to all 3 branches, and you know, they are. Unfortunately, we talked about some of these people that are really not supporting our way of life, if you will. And they're there for life, and they never seem to die. Only the good ones die young.
Okay, let's change direction. In the interest of time, because there's a lot of subjects that I really want to go through, I want to stay about 30 seconds. If we need more time, we will, but I'd like to stay on 30 seconds because these are some pretty direct questions, okay? You would serve with the new president. One more time. You would serve with the new president.
Yay! Yes.
Just checking the audience, okay? Okay. Republican, that's why they were waiting in the chair. Clarify. Okay. You would be serving with a new president. And with a lot of the campaign promises out there, you may be sitting looking at some legislation that you have to make some decisions on. So let's start first of all on illegal aliens, the immigration situation in this country. And I'll randomly go, Mr. Fitzpatrick, would you support building a wall, and how adamant are you if you say yes, you're supporting building a wall? Would you support building a wall between Mexico and the United States?
I support securing our borders, northern, southern, wherever they are. And if that means a physical wall, then fine. If it means some kind of electronic surveillance, if it means putting troops on the borders with our National Guard, then whatever it takes in order to be able to secure. But see, you used a key word there, illegal aliens.
Right.
And so what we've got to make sure is that anybody that comes into this country does so legally. And let me just go to say this, that part of the spending in the omnibus bill was to provide tax credits for illegal aliens in this country. And we've got to make sure that that never happens again.
That's right.
You may see, Mr. Scupin, legislation concerning immigration. Would you, what priority is the wall first? First, second, third? Is there a pathway for citizenship? I know that's more than 30 seconds, but would you support building a wall?
Yes, I would definitely support building a wall because I don't know how else we're going to stop illegals from coming in. You know, we've got to have some kind of a wall there, whatever that wall looks like. We've got to have a wall to stop it. And it makes no sense to start even talking about a path to citizenship until we stop that. We're here, 11 million illegals are in this nation. That cannot be right. You know, my guess is it's 3 or 4 times that number that are in this nation, because we have people coming that they don't honor our visa system. They just simply stay here and don't go leave the country because we have no way to check on it. Our presidents have let us down because they've chosen, did you hear that? They've chosen not to enforce the law.
Illegals, it has been shown, proven that the number one issue right now in the presidential campaign that has got most people interested is illegal aliens. Mr. Fontaine, General, would you build a wall? Would you secure the borders first? What would you do?
The first thing I do is see to it that the law is enforced that we have in place now. I've dealt with employers who know darn well that they're breaking the law, and the federal law enforcement agencies do nothing about that, and it's a multiple complaints there. The wall itself, I'm an engineer. I love to build walls. The only thing I love better than building a wall is blowing one up. Yeah, you know, I find it ridiculous that we can build walls up and down the interstate for hundreds of thousands of miles to protect the interstate from hills and trees. But yet we can't build a wall down on the border. We can do it, and we need to do it.
Dr. Brown, what kind of legislation would you like to see in securing the border, and what would you support?
We don't need any new legislation. In the 1986 bill, it authorizes securing the border. We've got to secure the border first and foremost. Then we have to start enforcing the laws on the books. We've had 4 presidents that have refused to do both. And until we do those 2 things, nothing else matters. But I introduced a bill called No Amnesty for Any Reason. And I don't want to give these lawbreakers any amnesty. They need to go home, period. They have broken the laws, not only come in this country illegally, but they've broken many, many laws. They all have fraudulent IDs and do lots of things that are illegal. I'm not giving anybody any amnesty, but the first thing we've got to do is secure the border by whatever means possible. I'd like to see us put troops on the border. You can't build a wall across the Great Lakes. But Roger's right, we've got to secure the borders north and south.
Okay, let's try to stay around 30 seconds so we can get everything in tonight. We'll use the number 11 million here at this time. Do you, Mr. Scupin, let's just go left to right. Do you send 11 million home, or how do you process them?
Yes, our presidents have done that before. Yes, I think we send them home. We round them up, send them home. And we also put heavy penalties on the employers that are hiring them. If we did that, we might not have to round them up and send them home. They might leave on their own.
You would support legislation that sent them home?
Sure.
Okay. Dr. Brown, would you support legislation that sent them all home? I would stress all. 11 million.
We don't have to pack them up and send them home. All we have to do is stop the federal largesse that they have here. If they have no incentive to be here, if we start enforcing the laws, then they're going to leave. They're here. A lot of those people are here for jobs and for their economy. And it's against the law to hire, rent to, or harbor an illegal alien. We've got to start enforcing the laws. But there are also people coming across the border that aren't Mexicans. The Border Patrol calls them OTMs, other than Mexicans, and it's a security issue. We've got to secure the border, and I'll do everything to do that first and foremost.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
As I mentioned in the omnibus bill, there are benefits that the illegals come here. And so if we were to cut off any opportunity for them, any reason for them to come to this country in the first place, jobs, federal benefits, tax benefits, and as far as the sanctuary cities that refuse to obey the federal law and they harbor those that are here illegally, we need to cut off funding to all sanctuary cities so that they will obey what the federal law is. And so if we do all of these things, we will not have very many illegals here. So, but if it requires legislation, let's go for it.
30 seconds, General.
I agree with everything that's been said here. I think that we need to stop the largesse. We need to get the employers, burn them good, because I've seen it personally. It really irritates me. And then, like you say, Dr. Brown, they'll go home on their own. I would give them, 90 days, whatever period of time, because if we let the federal government do it, they'll have to rent airplanes, and it'll cost us millions of dollars to get done what should be done with a launch car. No, I didn't say that. That's not it. That's good.
Dr. Brown, while many feel in this country we're spending a lot of time on social experiments, ISIS is, they're running through Europe, Brussels, and where I want to go with this is if you take San Bernardino, Fort Hood, Chattanooga, and multiple attacks right here on this soil, would you support? And this is Islamic, radical Islamic terrorist Muslims. These are not Christians attacking our country. These are not Christian attacks. Would you support some kind of processing system into this country of Muslims that come through? Because you may see some legislation, or you may see a president saying, we want to look at the process of the people coming into this country.
ISIS is an existential threat to our security as a nation. And in fact, in the omnibus bill, Doug Collins voted to continue that movement of Syrian refugees in this country. ISIS has said they're going to add at least 3,000 ISIS fighters into the Syrian refugees that are coming into this country. And Doug Collins has voted for it. He voted for a lot of bad policy that Barack Obama's put in place. We need to stop legal immigration for the time being, and particularly from people from Muslim countries, because there's no way whatsoever to vet them and know whether they're going to be a threat to us or not. And certainly we've got to stop the Syrian refugee program.
Mr. Scupin?
Yes, I think we definitely have to stop the Muslims temporarily coming into this nation, because there's no way to vet these people. We tend to think about how you vet people by looking in records and so forth. These countries don't keep records like we do. There's no way to go back behind them and find out whether somebody from Syria moved over into Ecuador and they're coming in from over there. So it's a very dangerous situation. If you really study the Quran and where it came from and understand abrogation and taqiyya, you begin to understand that we cannot continue to allow this situation to continue.
General Fontaine?
It brings to mind something I heard from Australia. We have our rules. If you don't like them, don't come. That's the short answer. We have to look at the Arab mentality and the way it operates. ISIS can be eliminated. Obama's chief of staff, Joint Chief of Staff General said, take 20 years to do that. I think that General Stormin Norman, who I knew, would probably say, give me at least 6 months, but probably not in say 30 days.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Not all Muslims are terrorists, but 100% of the terrorists are Muslims. And there has been at least twice in the history of the United States where presidents have shut the borders to specific types of ethnic groups. And it is important, especially in this day and time, that we do the same thing to Muslims until we get a handle on how are we going to determine if somebody's coming into this country, or are they going to be friend, or are they going to be foe? And until we can 100% guarantee, or at least as close as possible to 100%, I say shut the door, because the one responsibility of the federal government is national security.
That's right.
Dr. Brown?
Can I tell you a vetting process that we should do?
Yeah, make it quick.
Because these people don't have birth certificates. What I think we ought to do is line them up and give them ham sandwiches, and those that need them, maybe consider bringing them here.
Dr. Brown, Dr. Brown, let's,
Let Archie serve.
Dr. Brown, let's talk about our veterans. Many are concerned with the scandals in the VA, some of the men and women that have come home from these conflicts, and the care of our men and women in military, our veterans. What have you done while you were in Congress, and what would you propose when you go back, if you were to go back, what would you propose that we do to take care of our veterans?
Taking care of veterans is a national security issue. And the reason it is because if we don't take care of the veterans on the backside of serving our country, those men and women who put on the cloth of our military services, how are we going to get good people to come in and be senior enlisted people, NCOs as we call them, in the military? Senior officers or flag officers, those are the generals and admirals. It's just not going to happen. Plus, we've made promises to veterans that the federal government's not upholding. I went down to the VA hospital just a couple of weeks ago in Decatur and sat down and spent 2.5 hours talking to veterans. If you want to know what we should do, go on my website, paulbrown.com/veterans, and you'll see our whole program that we put forward. We've got 2 veterans sitting over here, and Wendy at South Hall Republican meeting just told us about the difficulty she's having. That's intolerable as far as I'm concerned. That's got to stop, and I'll do everything I can. I'll be the best friend a veteran has once y'all send me to Congress in January.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
It is a national disgrace what we are doing to our veterans. And it is incumbent upon us to make sure that all levels of the Veterans Administration, if they don't do their job, they are out of a job. I don't care what kind of job security they have. If they're not doing their job, if they're lying, if they are shredding records, if they are falsifying documents, heads need to roll. And then you bring in people that are going to actually have the interest of veterans at heart. And we can also change legislation so that if it's more advantageous for them to go to a private facility rather than a VA facility, fine and dandy, let's do it. But let's do whatever is necessary so that our veterans are taken care of.
Let's do it.
General Fontaine?
I'd like to point out I have some hearing aids here, and I couldn't have gotten a better hearing aid than I got from the VA. There is a good side to it.
Yes.
There's a good side to everything. There's also a bad side, and you've heard some of that. I think that we should have the legislation that may be necessary, but the next president needs to roll some heads at the top. And the political appointed types, they are so screwed up that it's just incredible. On the bottom side, there is a master contract with the Federal Employees Union that goes contrary to what the law of the land says, which is to employ veterans should get preferences. Now, the VA hires fewer veterans than other departments in the federal government, which is totally intolerable. In the state of Georgia, the State Department of Veterans Affairs has 80% of their people are veterans. I know that because my son's one of them. And they do the job. There's that air of contempt. And that's what you probably ran across, Dr. Brown, when you go down to that hospital. You know, like, you can't do anything to me.
Yeah.
And
That's it.
have you run into that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Scupin?
You're not going to fix the VA. It's that simple. You know, let's face it. You can't have a system where people can't get fired and expect them to stand up and do the right thing. It's not going to happen. If you think that the government can run any kind of medical facility better than private enterprise, then I got some bridges I want to sell you that are out in the desert, because you are a candidate to buy them. You've got to shut the VA down. It was a flawed system from the beginning. It will always be a flawed system. And you cannot, and you go all the way through the rest of the federal government, the same thing applies. That's why it's so hard to get something done at the IRS, the EPA, or whatever. You can't fire these people. They don't care. We've got to do something to change that. We've got to go back to our Constitution and we've got to shut these unconstitutional things down.
I agree.
Really quick answers. Would you, term limits, yes or no? Mr. Scupin?
Depends.
Go ahead, we want to hear more, just a little more, just a little. 15 seconds.
I look at what term limits has done to our president, and I'm not saying that we need to do away with that, but if you'll go back and study every president's last 4 years, that's when all the bad stuff happens. They sign anything to make government bigger. My theory is if we implement term limits, we are giving up our power as citizens to control the people we send up there. So it depends on how those term limits are set up and whether they can be changed or overridden by the people. Because if I have a Thomas Massey representing me in the 9th District, I don't want that man to come back home.
Dr. Brown, term limits?
No, I don't support them because I don't think it's going to solve the problem. It's a very popular political issue now because of our frustration. We're all fed up. But our founding fathers discussed term limits, and they decided that they weren't going to put it in the Constitution because they felt that you had the ability as citizens to limit somebody's term. And I don't want somebody to stay in more than one term if they're not upholding the Constitution. And that's the reason we need to have a revolution at the ballot box to do so, to get rid of people who are not upholding their oath of office to uphold the Constitution. But let me add this. I believe very firmly that the states could put in term limits for their members of Congress if they wanted to do so. And that's the way to institute term limits if we're going to get it done. And so the state folks, Coach and John, y'all might introduce legislation to try to get the state to put in term limits on the members of Congress from Georgia if you're so inclined.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
The vast majority of the voters, back when the founders put this government together, they were informed voters. They were like people like you. You knew what was going on. They knew what was going on. And so they knew that when they voted for somebody to go to Congress, if they didn't do their job, those congressmen knew, I'm coming back home. But now we have anybody, everybody, whether you've got an idea or not, can go to the polls and you can vote. And so the politicians know that once I get in there, it's almost impossible to get you back out. We have a political class that was unknown in founding times. Yes, I am for term limits because we don't need a political class in Washington anymore.
Yes.
Mr. Fontaine, General?
Yes, I agree with Roger. I'd like to just expand a little bit on that and talk about the PAC system, which is a totally corrupt system. Bernie Sanders, the other Bernie, mentions it's the only thing that said that's right. And the money that is put in, you can see it when you look around. You know, lots and lots of big signs, lots and lots of ads in the media, junk mail in your mailbox, and Robo-Man, of course. All of that thing costs money, and that is from vested interest. A person gets in, as he says, it's hard to get him out. Based on that, I feel that that is necessary.
Okay, we're going to get to our closing statement, but before we do, obviously I want to kind of close up tonight. Congressman Doug Collins is not here, and the four of you are challenging him in the 9th District. He is he is running for his 3rd term. He ran the first time in an open seat. So I don't want to ask you why you're running, because you always get, why are you running? I want to know why you think, because obviously when you qualify, why do you think Doug Collins should not have the job anymore and you should? Start with you, Mr. Fontaine. 1 minute.
Okay, I have expanded on that earlier in saying that, you know, who's the most conservative, I really don't care. Who gets the job done is what I care about. The job has to be done in a conservative manner, but the job is not getting done. Look at the legislative record. You know, what has come out of the other end? Has a bill that he has introduced ever become law? You know what the answer is? No. Passing resolutions, great. We pass a resolution saying that we support apple pie motherhood. Amounts to nothing. Getting the job done is what's important, and it's not getting done. What is coming back to the 9th District here? When I was in the military, there was a lot being brought back to Georgia because I felt that was my job, and I brought it back to Georgia. Right now, we're getting nothing. I go through all 19 counties, and what do we see? Empty factories, infrastructure that's not getting taken care of, and lots and lots of largesse, as I believe you called it. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Fitzpatrick, why do you think that Congressman Collins should no longer represent the 9th District?
The 9th District is easily the most conservative district east of the Mississippi and easily the 3rd most conservative in the entire United States. And we currently have a representative that is no conservative. He is an establishment person in Congress who is more concerned with voting the way that leadership wants him to vote rather than voting the conservative interest of those of us who live in the 9th District. And it is time to have somebody in Congress representing you the way that you deserve to be represented, and that is according to the conservative values, according to the Judeo-Christian ethic, according to the original intent of the Constitution. That's what you deserve.
Great.
Dr. Brown, why should Congressman Collins no longer represent this district, and you should?
But he doesn't represent the district. He represents the leadership in Washington and the establishment and special interest. But I represent the people, and I will be the people's congressman when y'all elect me, once y'all put me in Washington in January. And what separates me from all the other candidates is I have a proven conservative constitutional record. A proven record of standing firm on the Constitution, voting the way I've told you to, that I would, on 4 questions. Is it biblically correct? Is it constitutional according to the original intent? Do we need it? Can we afford it? I'm fed up with Doug Collins. I'm fed up with the leadership in Washington. I'm fed up with what government's doing today. We call our campaign the Fed Up Express. Y'all come help join me to get this country back on the right course and put it on the principles that made this country great. And Doug Collins and the leadership in Washington in both parties are destroying it.
Mr. Scupin, why should you take the place of Congressman Doug Collins for the 9th District and represent these people?
If you've ever been to a town hall that Doug Collins was at and you ask him a question, which I have done, the answer I get back is he ends up representing Washington to me. I want to go to Washington and represent the 9th District attitude and philosophy to them. That's what I intend to do. Now, why can I do that? I can do it because I have no ambitions in Washington. Be perfectly frank with you, I don't want to go. I'd rather be home gardening. The only reason I got in this race because in December it looked like nobody else was going to be challenging Doug Collins. He needed to be challenged, and I stepped up to answer that call. That's why I'm doing this. That's the only reason I'm doing this. The man does not follow this document. And we need people. This is the only thing that's going to bring this nation back to the greatness it was when it was established. And without returning to the Constitution, and particularly Article 1, Section 8, the enumerated powers, we're going to continue going down the same road that we're on. And that's what I intend to stop, whatever it takes.
Okay, no 30 seconds, so please don't take off, but I do want a couple more things. Would you vote to overturn Obamacare? Do you think Obamacare needs totally overturned?
Totally.
Totally. Dr. Brown?
Yeah, I introduced the bill to do so. It's called the Patient Option Act. And it's the only bill that puts you in charge of making all your health care decisions. Even the Republican bills that are there today, all the rest of them, still allow a federal bureaucrat to make health decisions for you and your family. And it's got to stop. And what we'll do when I'm back in Congress as your congressman, the very first day, I'll reintroduce, first and foremost, my Sanctity of Human Life Act that defines life beginning at fertilization, to stop abortion. Then I'll reintroduce my Patient Option Act, my Jobs Act, and all the rest of them in a package, and we'll get those things passed.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Healthcare is not listed in the Constitution. The federal government has no business telling you what you may buy and what you may not buy. That is between you and your doctor, it's between you and your private insurance company, but the federal government has no business telling you, getting into your business when it comes to your health care. The Affordable Care Act was simply a way for the government to gain control over your lives, and it needs to be ripped out by the roots and thrown into the deepest pit that you can find, because it does not need to have any kind of influence in your life.
General?
I agree with all the other candidates here, but I'd like to point out that it needs to be eliminated, but it needs to be eliminated carefully, because there's going to be a lot of impact on innocent people. I have a younger son that has to spend $20,000 a year he doesn't have because of Obamacare. It needs to be eradicated, but it's going to affect a lot of people. It already has. We've created enough problems for everyday people. We need to be very careful when we get rid of Obamacare.
Number one foreign policy issue we have today, General?
ISIS.
Number one foreign policy issue we have, problem we have today?
Debt.
Debt. Number one foreign policy issue we have today, Dr. Brown?
Yeah, it's the number one problem we have today. It's killing our economy. It's a security threat. It's a foreign policy threat. It's a threat to everything.
Mr. Scupin?
Actually, it's the unfunded liabilities. We got a $102 trillion unfunded liability. We got a $20 trillion debt. So it's the unfunded liabilities are the real danger.
Let's go the opposite way. What do we do about the debt?
The simple way that I know to do it is to get rid of the Federal Reserve. As long as the Federal Reserve is in place, we will never eliminate the debt.
Dr. Brown?
I introduced a bill to get rid of the Federal Reserve, too. We've just got to stop spending money that we don't have. And that's absolutely the critical piece. And then we need to start sending powers back to the states or the people. And we have to have sound money policy. I introduced that kind of legislation, too. I've got positive solutions that we've introduced. Y'all send me back to Washington, and we'll continue to propose those solutions that are already out there. In fact, Connie Mack and I from Florida introduced the penny plan, which would balance the budget in 6 years. But frankly, I want to balance the budget in 1 year. The first year, I stop spending money that we don't have.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, the debt?
Let me read some numbers to you. By 2033, entitlements plus interest will consume all revenues. In the past 2 years, we had the highest revenues this country's ever seen. The debt service, interest on the debt, in 2016, $225 billion. By 2025, $772 billion. And by 2020, 4 years from now, mandatory spending and interest will consume 75% of the federal budget. We have got to cut spending so that we can pay down the debt.
General, the debt?
It's obvious we have to cut down spending, and it needs to be done very carefully so we don't hurt people, but we need to cut down. And there's so much fraud, waste, and abuse to start with. The other big one, of course, is so-called entitlements. The other side of the thing is the revenue side. And we need to bring industry back here, because if a person is unemployed and on welfare, it's costing us money. If a person is working, it's making us money. They're paying taxes instead of eating them up. So that is a very important part, is to bring the jobs back as well as cut the large debts. Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for answering these questions. I'd be glad to stay much longer. You probably know that. But we're going to go ahead and close for tonight, and we appreciate each and every one of you. We're going to go 2 minutes, and we're going to go right in reverse as we started out. So, General Fontaine, 2 minutes to close, please.
Okay, what I feel is most important is to get this government back moving again. And you have to send somebody to Washington. You have two choices: career politicians or citizen candidates. Among the citizen candidates, you need to look at qualifications, which I said early on. The first and most important part is leadership. There is no leadership in Washington. There's leadership needed there to get the job going again. The second part is experience. I've had experience at all three levels of government. I've worked in Washington, I've worked with Atlanta and in Atlanta, and I've worked at the county level, all three levels of government. The next thing is working with budgets and so forth. I've worked with all kinds of bureaucrats and so forth. I know the system from top to bottom, and I know how to get up there and make things working again, start to work again. The third thing is every bit of my education has been towards my job, which was working with government, and it's geared that way. So I feel very confident that I can get up there and get something done. I'm one of 435 people, but I know how to coalesce a group of people, and when you've got numbers, then you get something done. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, General. General Fontaine. Mr. Fitzpatrick, 2 minutes to close.
The United States of America has been referred to as the Great Experiment. Never before in the history of mankind have we had a constitutional republic based on the principles that our founders gave us in the form of government that we have. And it is for that reason that we became the exceptional nation in the earth. And I would dare say the greatest nation that's ever been on the face of the earth. There's a reason. But we have gotten away from that blueprint. We've gotten away from the enumerated powers that Congress is supposed to have. We've gotten away from the 6 powers that the presidency is supposed to have. We've gotten away from those 11 different types of cases. We've gotten away from the design that our founders gave us. And the way that we are going to be able to return not just to the level of greatness that we have seen before in the past, but an untold level of greatness that is yet before us. And it can be done. But we have got to get back to that blueprint the way that our founders designed this to be. We need to do it for ourselves. But more importantly, we need to do it for our children. We need to do it for our grandchildren. And as long as this nation is around, for great-grandchildren, and so on, and so on, and so on. Because I tell you what, the Statue of Liberty talks about those that are yearning to be free. We were created to be that beacon on a hill, that shining light, so that all the other nations would be able to see that's how it's supposed to be done. And so we have got to get back to that exceptional type of government, that exceptional nation, that strong nation that nobody is going to dare come up to us and say, act like a bully and kick sand in our face. Because they know if they do, then we will respond, and we will respond appropriately. I ask for your prayers. I ask for your support. I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Dr. Paul Broun, 2 minutes to close.
Your choice is clear. Do you want to continue where we're going with our current congressman, who is an establishment, beltway type of individual who's supporting the leadership in Washington, D.C., or do you want somebody who has a proven record? A proven record on standing firm on those things that we are talking about, and that's this document, the Constitution of the United States. I've got that proven record. When you're involved in a fight, in a war, as a Marine, you don't want to send greenhorn troops. You want to send people who've been in the foxhole, who've been on the front line, people who have a proven record of standing firm on representing you, representing the principles that made this country great. You can go on my website, paulbroun.com, and you can see the things that I have proposed previously, what I'll fight for you. We've got to rebuild this country. We're losing our freedom and our liberty. We've got to go back to those foundational principles. In fact, in Psalm 11:3, God says, if the foundations be destroyed, what are the righteous to do? I think that's a call to all of us to fight, to restore those foundational principles. A vibrant free enterprise system, a strong military, taking care of our veterans. where we have jobs available for our young people, so that when they get out of college, they can go to work. And my jobs bill would do that. It will create a vibrant economy. We've got to put people back to work and get people off of the public dole. Those are the positive solutions that I've offered. Doug Collins, on the other hand, all he's done is voted for more and more government, more taxes. And that omnibus bill is the greatest example of how out of touch he is with the people of this district. So vote Paul Brown. When I'm your congressman, I'll represent you, not the special interest in Washington. And I'll stand firm on those 4 questions. Vote Paul Brown. Volunteer. Come be a part of our Fed Up Express to save America. Thank y'all. God bless you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mike Scupin, 2 minutes to close.
Doug Collins sits on the House Rules Committee. Now, I don't know how many in here recognize what that means, but that tells me that Doug Collins is going to do what leadership in Congress desires. Nothing goes to the floor of Congress that doesn't pass through the House Rules Committee. The establishment leadership will never allow a man to sit on the House Rules Committee unless they can control him completely. That tells us in a nutshell who Doug Collins is. Now, one of the main problems that we have in this nation, because it affects our debt and every other aspect, is the Federal Reserve System. If you've got a dollar bill or a $20 bill, I want you to look at it sometime and look what it says right at the very top. It says Federal Reserve Note. Now, what that tells me is I know when I go to the bank and I sign a note, I know I've got to pay somebody something. That's what happens with the Federal Reserve. They set up there this unconstitutional organization, and they type on a keyboard, and these things come out. They're backed by nothing. When they do that, guess what? You have to pay them interest on this, as long as it's in circulation. So the key to restoring America's greatness is returning to the Constitution, which Doug Collins has sworn before God to uphold and defend. He's a pastor. He should know what that oath means.
Right.
But he chooses to ignore it and votes for what the establishment wants. We've got to return to this. We've got to take our Federal Reserve System and demolish it and put the hands of our money back into the U.S. government treasury where this document says it belongs.
Right.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's hear it for our candidates tonight. It's a long way up there. Just a real quick note. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Now, a couple things. On Friday morning, I will have an opportunity with all 5. Congressman Collins will be joining us Friday morning. So at fetchernews.com, my little plug for programming, go to fetchernews.com, click on FYN TV. We live stream and do a show between 8 and 10 every morning. But Friday morning, these gentlemen, there'll be no campaign signs. There'll be no audience. It'll only be the camera, the candidates, and the issues. So we'll have 1 hour Friday morning, and Congressman Doug Collins will be with us. Okay, gentlemen? Thank you very much. I appreciate it. 8 from 8 to 9 a.m. Thank you.